Looking to be more productive and jump those hurdles of change and challenge easier? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Thrive in Life with your hosts, Zaheen Nanji.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Thrive in Life show, episode number 35. I'm your host, Zaheen Nanji. Well, in episode number 35, you're going to learn all about discovering your why. Because once you discover that, you will be able to thrive in life more and be resilient. I have an amazing guest today. His name is Poirier. I hope I'm saying this right. What I've been doing usually is I do the intro after the interview so that I can share with you what I learned and what I think you will learn as well. So in this episode, we'll learn things like how to discover your why and the importance of it. You will learn how to thrive in life using your why, as well as an amazing strategy that he shared, which I'm not going to spill the beans, on how to use that strategy to discover your why and your passion. Okay, so let me introduce you to Corey, but first I'll read the bio, okay, quickly. Corey is an award-winning keynote speaker. He's a multiple-time TEDx speaker. He is a MoMonday speaker. He's also the host of a radio show himself, and I've been on it. It's called Conversations with Passion. And he also has a new podcast as well called Speaking Related Podcast, and the founder of the Speaking program. He has been featured on Global TV, CBS, CBC. He's had 1-hour TV specials on Eastlink and other television series. And he has over 900 articles in print. He was asked actually to go to New York City, where he had the extreme pleasure of speaking to at-risk youth at the Brooklyn Navy Yard Boys and Girls Club. And he himself has interviewed around 4,000 influencers. So I'm so glad that he agreed to be on the show. All right, so you're ready? Let's get on with it. Hello, Corey, and welcome to the show. And today we're going to discuss about the new book that you have out, right, called How to Find Your Why. And I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. We've known each other quite a while, so I'm excited for us to connect this way today and hopefully make some magic happen. For sure, yes. So let's just get straight into it. So why is discovering one's why so important? So for me, I guess why it's important to me is because there's a two side. There's why is it important to somebody else? Why is it important for me to help people discover it? And so the why, from my perspective, is when I discovered mine, it changed my life. Mm-hmm. And just for a point of context or reference, when I say discovering your why, to me, that's the same as saying discovering your purpose or your calling or your passion. Just because sometimes people might not know when I say this why, they might not know what I'm talking about. So first of all, it's important because I know the difference it can make in your life because it made it my life. So I discovered my why in my mid-20s. And it changed everything. It changed all the rules. It changed my life. I literally can tell you, I won't go so far as to say it saved my life for sure. There's no way to know that. But what I will say is the person I was before I discovered my why and after, you can measure the difference. And I mean, I can explain it if you want, but the other side.
Please do.
Okay. So I'll explain that, and then I'll say why is it important for somebody else, in my opinion. So what I mean by that is before I discovered my why, I was, for lack of a better way of explaining it, I was a pessimist. And at the same time, I was also a hypochondriac. And so for viewers, listeners who may not know what that means, basically anytime I read about a disease or an ailment, I would develop the symptoms and literally feel everything and think I had that illness. Mm-hmm. And so what I discovered is you can't be a hypochondriac and also an optimist. The two will have a hard time existing in the same body because they're two different mentalities. So what I know is until that point in my life, I was very much a pessimist. And then when I discovered my why, everything started to change. I had people at work say, did you meet somebody and fall in love? Because you seem to have this different jump in your step. And so, we talk about newly loves and that feeling we get when that passion of that new relationship. That's how discovering my why felt to me. So how I found it was I jumped onto a stand-up comedy stage. I've told this story many times, so I'll just say I bombed horribly, but I kept going back. It was a big fear to me. Speaking for me was that number one fear that we all hear about, and comedy was even worse.
Yes.
People can heckle you and all that other stuff. And so I went on the stage, I bombed horribly, I kept going back. It wasn't my why or my passion, but I felt that's when they started saying, you seem different. And so what happened was I discovered that speaking, which is very similar to stand-up, was my true passion. So once I got a glimpse of it, I started seeking more after the stand-up. I started saying, what's close to stand-up? Because there's something here. But there were elements of stand-up I didn't like. And so what happened was I discovered speaking and realized all the things I loved about stand-up, and that they weren't, all the things I loved about stand-up, I could get those from speaking. All the things I didn't like didn't exist in speaking. So it was like this true win-win. And so that's how I discovered my why. And it changed everything. It made me feel like that kid feels on Christmas Day, the ones that love Christmas, that run down the stairs, or that fire in my belly that nobody can extinguish. Basically, every day I get up excited to do it all over again, and I never used to feel that way. As I mentioned, I thought I had illnesses. I always thought the world was coming to an end. And after I discovered my why, all of a sudden, it all but disappeared, that hypochondria. I started being positive and optimistic and passionate. So I started investigating and realized that for most people, when they discover their why, this is a common thing. It wasn't abnormal to me. And so why do I think it's important, which is back to your original question, is I think it's important because it can change everything. It can change how you feel. It can change how you live. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called The Greatest Miracle in the World by Ogmandino. And he talks about in the book, the rag picker is the character that introduces them to this. The rag picker talks about how a lot of people die, and the greatest miracle is that we can still come back to life. And so Ogmandino just said, do you think people can come back to life on a regular basis as a miracle? And he said, absolutely. He said, because I think when people are living without purpose or passion or their why, they're kind of in some ways sort of maybe almost similar to being dead, because they're walking around purposeless. And what he explains in the story is that you can actually help them find that purpose or their why and sort of come back and spring back to life. So that's why I think it's important, is because I think it truly does give that person a new lease on life, and they find their passion, and they're sick less often, and they have more resilience, and all those great things that come along with that. So that was a long answer, but the truth is for me, it changed everything, and I believe it can transform a person's life, discovering their why. So that's why it's so important to me.
So then let me ask you this. You said it was back in your youth that you found this why, because you went up on stage and you did stand up. Can the why change over time, or can it even kind of like, you just like, say you come into your 40s and 50s and you go, I think my why has changed. Can that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, you can have multiple passions. So if we define passion as why, if those are somewhat interchangeable. By the way, the reason we have our show, as you know, called Conversations with Passion. So I don't avoid the word passion. So somebody might wonder why I use the word why. The reason is because I found that passion has become an overused word. And I'm starting to see a lot more people have a negative connotation towards passion only because it's so used. And so, but I still think they're interchangeable. So if you can have multiple passions, I believe you can actually have multiple whys. But there's probably always going to be one central why. So here's an example. For example, let's say your why, your true why, is helping people escape. Let's just say escape their everyday. Maybe they're not happy with what they do, and you want to take them out of that for a short amount of time and give them happiness. Well, if we use the examples I gave, I could do that with speaking, or I could do that with stand-up, or I could do that as a musician on the stage. In all those ways, people can come after work to a show that I'm putting on, and maybe I can help them escape. So maybe my why, my real why, is helping people feel better on a daily basis or become a better version of themselves. Well, the actual what we do, which some people would describe as the passion, that can change every year. I mean, that can change all the time. So it could be, like I said, it could be now you're doing it, like now I'm doing it from a stand-up stage, let's say. And then a year from now, I could be doing it as a speaker. And maybe 2 years from now, I start doing photography. and I'm capturing people's wedding pictures
Mm-hmm.
and sharing that with other people. And maybe that's how I help people put a smile on their face and escape their day and what have you. So
Right.
I don't know if that answered the question, but I believe
You
that it
did.
can constantly be evolving.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer for sure. So why is it that so few of us know our why? Is it hard to find, or is it that we don't know?
So here's the interesting part, and this is, again, talking about evolution. This is how I've evolved, because I used to say find your passion, and we're going to help you find your passion. And something I sort of, as I kept analyzing it, something I feel in terms of at least how I view it now that has changed is I actually think we all have it inside of us. So it's actually almost like it's uncovering it rather than finding it. So I believe we're sort of chipping away or peeling the onion to get to the layer of where's my passion. And for some people, it can be right on the surface. So I have a client who, recently sold her accounting firm, but she ran it for like 25 years. And so when she was like 6, 7, she recalls lining up her teddy bears and teaching them accounting with an ESO board. So it's safe to say she discovered her why earlier than most.
Mm-hmm.
And she sold an accounting firm that she loved like just a year ago. So for all those years, she's been living that why, and it hasn't changed. So going back to the point, for some people it might evolve, for some it might not. The other side is, like I said, for her, it wasn't probably that far below the surface, because she knew from such a young age, this is what my why is. For others like me, in my mid-20s, that's when I discovered it. And it was buried fairly deeply, because I never saw any hints of it until by accident, the happy accident, did the stand-up. So first of all, I think uncovering it can be hard or easy depending on the person. Secondly, I'll tell you really quickly, an exercise a person can do that I believe that'll help it come up to the surface easier. So I don't think it has to be so hard, but I feel what happens, Zaheen, is that a lot of people don't know the benefits. We talked a minute ago about the benefits. And, if I go further with that, I notice that people that have discovered their why or their passion are sick less often. They seem happier overall. Their health seems better. They seem to walk around with more of a purpose. Other people seem to like to be around them because they just say, oh, that person has so much energy. And so there's so many benefits. But if you've never experienced it like me until mid-20s, you would think, well, you hear about a person that's super happy and you're like, that's just a woohoo person. What do they say? Woo-woo. They're just like false happy and they're faking it until they make it. But once you actually experience it and feel it, you don't ever want to lose it. So I think the reason it's so hard for so many people is they don't know the benefit. They don't know there's another way. They don't know there's a different way than getting up every morning and being unhappy that you got to go into the office again.
Mm-hmm.
So once they discover that, I think it changes everything. But for some people, it's a happy accident like it was for me. For others, they know from early on. And then for yet others, again, unless somebody helps them or opens the door, they might never find it. So with your permission, I can give you like a 2-minute exercise.
Oh, yes. So is this your strategy to help others find their why?
Yeah. So in the book we mentioned, the Why book, I just call it the Book of Why, which is actually the website too. But anyway, the Book of Why, in that book, this is the exercise I teach early on in the book that I've used many times with people people reporting months later, hey, you know what, now I'm doing this and I never even knew what my why was. And it was that exercise that did it. So I've seen people literally take this, which when you think about finding your why, which is such a grandiose thing, some people spend 20 years searching for it. If you can find it using this little exercise or even get closer, I think it's worth your while. What I will say, for somebody who takes this exercise on, it may take you 2 or 3 months to actually figure out which one is your why. Mm-hmm. So I'm not promising like get rich, discovery quick. But what I will say is some people it might be the first thing, and I'll explain what I mean in a second here, but the first thing on their list, so they might find it within a week. Other people, it might take months. But here's my central point. I've heard numbers that as low as 5%, that only 5% of people will discover their why in their whole lifetime.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've heard those numbers with statistics, but what I will say is, there's a saying that says, if you're not happy with a statistic, go make one up. There's so many statistics that it's hard to know, is this accurate? But I have heard that statistic more than once. So if the number is low like that, 5 or even 10%, that find their why, and think of all we've been able to do and the miracles we've been able to do with people that discovered their why with 5%. But if most people go their whole life and never discover it, wouldn't it be worth even 3 or 4 months of work? And I don't mean work, because if you're doing something that you think you might love, it's not really work, but wouldn't it be worth 2 or 3 months to find it? So this exercise may take you a month or 2 or 3 months to go through the whole process. But what I'm saying is that there's a better chance of you finding your why than if you don't do the exercise. And if it only takes you months to do something that some people don't find their whole lifetime, that can actually change your life for the better, I think it's worth it. So without further ado, Here's the
Let's get into it.
Okay, perfect. So what I'll say is get a pen and a piece of paper. I mean, talking now to anybody that's saying, I want to try this exercise on. You can use your phone. You can use a laptop, but I'm a pen and a piece of paper guy, old school when it comes to thinking and creativity stuff. So
I'm going to do that too.
Okay, perfect. So it's a pretty easy exercise in theory. It's just going to take some time for somebody to go through it. But the exercise is essentially, what I want you to do is start making a list of the following. So, and this you might not be able to do on the fly for all these, but I'll let you decide if you can. If you can, that's super cool. But I want you to ask yourself the questions, what is the thing that I would do if money wasn't an issue?
Mm-hmm.
Then I want you to add in, and this is a similar question, but it's still, I get you thinking different ways. What would you do if you won the lottery? Because everybody says, if I won the lottery, I go to a beach and never work again. But I think you and I both know people that say they're going to retire and they can't wait and they spend all that time just waiting for retirement and then pass away a week later. I don't honestly think it's because they necessarily love their job. I just think they lost their identity or their purpose, which was the job.
That's so true.
So this is why I asked you to ask that question. What would you do if you won the lottery? Because you would still do something. You might go to the beach for a month, but you will come back and say, I need to do something with my life. So what is that thing you would do? And maybe it's charity. Maybe it's things that you couldn't do because you're fighting for money all the time now. But anyway, put that in your list. So now you got, what would you do if money was an issue? What would you do if you won the lottery? I'll add in, what would you do? What did you do when you were a kid? When money wasn't a factor that got you super excited? So for me, I love doing things that involved, like let's say games, like so hide and seek and all those games. I love being around a lot of people, and I love being the guy in the center saying, why don't we try it this way? And so in other words, if I look back now, I can say I loved communicating. I love chatting with people. I love trying to be the influencer and not trying to manipulate, but just be in the mix and help people and be out there. And so there were signs of who I am today, I believe, from that time when I was a kid. So that friend of mine and that client, I said that, her sign was that she used to love teaching accounting to her teddy bears. So go back and say, what are the things that you loved doing when you were a kid? Then what I want you to ask, and this is a really big one, what is the thing that when you were doing it, like let's say you wanted to go to clown college, and your parents said, no, you have to go to University of Calgary or University of Alberta or NAIT or what have you. Somebody pushed you off your path. So your path was maybe going to clown college, and at that point, somebody pushed you off. And it could be anything, could be photography, and they said, you can't make a living at that. Go back to that point and ask yourself, why was that important to you? So, and then what was that? So in other words, let's say if it was clown college, maybe you didn't want to be a clown, but there was something in there that made you want to go to clown college. So now all of a sudden you can see what you're doing here. You're building a list of these things that could be your why. Because these are the things you don't watch the clock when you're doing them. You get excited about. You would do if money was an issue. You would do if you won the lottery. You did when you were a kid. And it goes on and on. But you're building this list that kind of get through and say, what are the things that could be my why? So for me, if I were making this list before I discovered my why, I would have put playing music. So I play music, I write songs. So I would have put writing and playing music. I would have put, as I mentioned with stand-up, I would have probably put watching stand-up comedy. So I would have started putting all these things down that I love doing on a list. And then what I want people to do, now you have a list, let's say it's 8 or 10, could be 4. There's no judgment here. You have your list. What I want you to do then is start going through the list, and then I want you to prioritize them in order. Because usually you're probably just doing it as an exercise, like you're not trying to go, okay, what's my number 1, what's my 2? You're just doing it as you go. Now I want you to say, what are the ones that if I didn't do them ever again, it wouldn't bother me a bit? Those obviously go to the bottom of the list, because those aren't your priority ones. Then near the top, what are the things if I couldn't do them again, like me playing guitar, it would actually I would have a hole in my life. So you want to have those at the top. And the reason for this is I'm all about efficiency. So I said it might take you months to do this, but I'm about efficiency. I want you to do it in weeks if possible. So what you need to do is you need the ones that are more likely your why at the top of the list, because you want to try those first.
Right.
I go through the ones that are least likely to be your why to get to the harder, get to the why, because you might quit before that if you have to go through a lot of exercises. So I want you to go through the list, reword it, put it in order of the ones you love the most or you think you would love. You could even add in, by the way, when you make that list, what are the things I think I would be good at doing or people have said I'm good at doing?
Yes.
Because that's another hint. So now what you want to do, Zaheen, is you have a list, you have a rough list, then you put it in order. You maybe went 1 to 10 or whatever the number is. And what I want you to do is I want you to take the top one, the one that's most likely your why, hopefully. And what I want you to do then is I want you now to make that the focus. So let's say, and I'm using the same example to make this easy, let's say it was stand-up comedy. for me. And let's say I didn't get thrown onto the stage like I did with, by accident. So what I would do is I would maybe put stand-up comedy, and you can actually physically do this if you want. I use the thing called the spider method. You can draw a circle and in the center put stand-up comedy. And then what I want you to do, if you use that approach, is I want you to do the spider legs. Those are going to be the steps you're going to take that you'll have to take to eventually try stand-up. Because I did a talk, people can check out, my second TEDx talk was on stepping outside your comfort zone. And I shared that what I've discovered is one of the biggest action items that's most people have to do that they don't is taking those baby steps.
Yes.
Because jumping onto the stand-up stage is a hard, big step. And doing that, you'll probably quit before you do that for most people. But if you then, with that, either use that spider method I mentioned, have the spider, and then you use the legs as your steps, or even if you just write down stand-up comedy at the top, and then make a list of the steps you'll have to take to try stand-up, then you might put going and watching another stand-up comic. You might put seeing if I can interview a comic, a local comic. You might put going to Toastmasters to get comfortable speaking on the stage. You might put watching comedy and taking notes of what works. And then each time you take one of those steps, you kind of you check it off, and then you give yourself a reward, because you want that thing that keeps you going. So you reward yourself for taking that step that you might not otherwise have taken. And then what I think you'll find will happen is after you've taken enough of the baby steps, when you're ready to take the step on the stand-up stage, it's not going to seem that big or far of a step because you've already gotten yourself so much closer with the baby steps. So then the big final step is jumping onto a stage. And then from that point, if it is your why, you should know fairly quickly. When I said it might take you months, it just might take you months to go through those steps. You can fast track it. It might not be something as crazy as stand-up comedy. So if it's an easier one, you might fast track and go through this whole thing in a week. But what I'm suggesting is go through for the top one that's on your list, the priority one, those steps. Figure out what the big part is, and then craft out your baby steps, and then start taking action and rewarding your baby steps each time you do it. And then if that one isn't your why, you go to the next on the list.
That's a great strategy. And I'm going to make sure for all the listeners and the viewers that we have the questions for you on the show notes as well. So we'll have that, and make sure you try it out, and you can draw out the spider circle and go for it. And I completely understand what you're saying, because same with me, speaking was a huge issue. Where I was so scared. I mean, even doing the video like that is scary, but I had to jump in somewhere. I had to do something somewhere, because in my heart of hearts, I knew that this is my why, is to use my voice as my strength and not my weakness, right?
I love that. And it's funny, I said it'll probably be 2 or 3 minutes of exercise. I think I took like 6, but hopefully that's cool. But again, I even think the 6 minutes are worth it based on how powerful discovering your why could be. But here's the thing too, just one little add on to that too, in terms of, because comfort zone is another big area, stepping outside our comfort zone. There's lots of quotes that say the true magic doesn't happen until you step outside your comfort zone. Whatever quote you want to use on that. But the truth is, what I've discovered is all the good is outside our comfort zone. I shouldn't say all the good, but there's some good inside our comfort zone. But to discover your best version of yourself possible, I find that most people have to take those steps outside their comfort zone. But here's the cool part. Once you take those steps, your comfort zone gets bigger. And then the next one you want to tackle, it gets bigger. So if stand-up comedy was the option, once you do stand-up, then all the other things, like for example, going to do a sales meeting one-on-one, gets way easier. Even with the top, let's say a VIP of a company, it gets way easier after you've done stand-up. So what I found is if you step outside your comfort zone, you grow it by stepping outside, the next thing gets easier. For instance, like I'm doing this interview with you, and I mentioned to you that basically where I'm working from today is I'm in a basement at my family's place because we're having a baby shower. Well, I wouldn't have been comfortable to do a video in this capacity when I started. But now I feel if the content's good enough, you know what, if I have a glare in my head that, like the miracle, it's like something shining down. But I mean, if that happens, I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with making it, going, let's say, I wouldn't say winging it, but I'm more comfortable than I would have been without having, before I would have had to have so much preparation. The lighting would have all been set perfectly. I'm a little more comfortable than that now. And I will say this, as maybe a better example, I've done interviews with a lot of the world's thought leaders. That's kind of my obsession, if you will. And I interviewed somebody whose name is Richard St. John, He has a 10 million plus viewed TED Talk. Richard wrote a book called 8 to Be Great. And so like me, he's become obsessed with interviewing people. So he's interviewed, I think, similar numbers, like probably 6,000 or 7,000 people. And so Richard was telling me the very first interview he did was with Martha Stewart. And
wow.
He was at a TED conference. And what he did, now this, I don't know if he shares this publicly, so I might be sharing something publicly that he doesn't, but how he got his first interviews is he stood by the bathroom door and he said, everybody has to go pee. So he said, this is where I'm going to meet the high influencers at the TED conference. And that's where he met Martha Stewart, just heading to the bathroom, whatever. And so he said, can I ask you a couple of questions? And I thought like security would tackle me. I didn't know what would happen, but she said, oh, sure. He said, it's about entrepreneurship. And she said, sure. She didn't even ask what project it was for or nothing. So he did this interview, but he said, like, it took him everything he had. He watched her walking and, there were a lot of steps probably between him saying, there's Martha Stewart and should I do this? And there were probably a lot of internal dialogues he had before he ever got up the nerve to start doing the interviews. And so all these things happened. And he said even the next interviews he did after hers weren't easier. And he would interview people that maybe were just a small business owner and he was still terrified. And he said, but today, if Oprah came along, he would jump in her lap if she asked him to. So similar to me, different example, but similar to me when I did stand-up, then my comfort zone expanded dramatically and I could do other things. Like I jumped out of a plane after doing stand-up. And I think it's because I realized I survived stand-up and I was told everybody, people die on stage. We always hear that over the years.
Yeah.
I was able to jump out of a plane without as much fear as I would have had otherwise. Well, Richard said, you know what? I was terrified to do interviews, but going through thousands of interviews, all of a sudden now he'd jump in Oprah's lap if she said you have to jump. So great. Our comfort zones do expand.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So how can living your why make you thrive in life? Like, how would that help? How can we put the two together?
So you talk about resilience a lot. Yeah. And, resilience to me is I'm going to say it's a powerful skill or trait, if we term it in that way, or you can say, whatever way you want to term it, whether it's something you have innately, which we probably all do, but the ability to be resilient, I think probably takes maybe a little bit of work or at least whether you do the pre-practice before it ever happens or whether, you deal with it when it happens. And what I've discovered is that, so I'll say it this way, out of all those interviews I mentioned that I've done, the most common trait, and this is by far, like I'm talking like the next closest trait is like 80% of the most common. It's like 20% higher than all the rest. And what it is that these top tier leaders have discovered their why. So they know why they were put here to do what they're doing, and they live in their why. They spend all their time doing what they love doing. So going back to the point, how can it help you thrive in life? What I've discovered is for most of those people, the amount of what's a nice way to say this? The amount of obstacles we'd have to face. This is the nice way to say it. The amount of obstacles we'd have to face, or the brick walls that would be put up in front of us that we wouldn't be able to get past. The amount of those that happen when you're an entrepreneur or you're even in any aspect of life today, the amount of those obstacles or challenges that we face are astronomical. And if what you're doing is not your passion or your calling or your why, you're probably not going to be resilient enough to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So to go back and answer the question, how can your why help you thrive? I believe if you find your why, it's going to allow you to overcome all the obstacles and things that are going to get in your way of living your why. And then secondly, if you're living your why, you are going to put more hours in, and it's not even going to feel like work. You're going to love more of what you're doing. You're going to put your love and your heart and your soul into everything you do. Seth Godin has this great quote, or this great thing, and he said, you should be able to look at a product and say, here, I made this. And so, you'll be able to put that love into it because you're actually passionate about it. If you're doing something that just to make money, let's say, then you're not going to put that love into it and that passion. And so first of all, it's going to be tainted with negative energy to start with. But secondly, it's not going to allow you to thrive because you're not going to want to keep doing it because money alone, if it was for money, won't drive that, but your why will. So my answer, I guess, would be A, it'll help you battle the obstacles that are going to get in your way along the way that are going to actually be there and are going to try to stop you from doing what you love doing. And so that's what's going to give you the strength to keep going because, I love this and I dig this and I just got to keep doing more of this. And so the other side to it is that if you discover your why, like I said, you're going to put more into it. You're going to put your heart and soul into it. And I believe you're going to have a better chance of thriving if you put your all into something than if you just go half, and ...
Yeah. I think I can see what you're saying is so true because even last year when I fell sick, I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to quit. What's the point, you know? And I was just in this mindset that was actually making me a victim, right? But then I felt like, okay, after I feel good or once everything is done, am I going to be happy? No, right? Like, because what I do gives me the strength to be who I am, and it actually brings me joy. And I'm really going to miss that. So I just trudged along and I kept on doing something or the other in my area. So I can totally see where you're going with this. All right, so let's talk about your book. What made you want to write that book? And I know it's out, so how can the viewers and listeners get the book?
So good news on both. Well, good news on both fronts. I'll save the great news until after I explain why I wrote it, in terms of how people can get it. But the why that I wrote it, which is kind of ironic, the book's called Why. It's about 4 whys. So there's a lot of whys involved in this book. Why I wrote it is because I put a series out of 3 books. So the first one was called Thriving. Second was called Enlightened. So Thriving, Enlightened, and then Why. And so partly it was because it felt like the book that was missing in that series, meaning like the Thriving talked about how do you, quote unquote, I'll use it this way, how do you crush it from a pure business perspective? You know, so how do you thrive? Like, how do you manage your day? And so it wasn't about numbers, if you will, but it was really about I'm going to say it wasn't the organic things happen on their own. It was like, yeah, how do you make stuff happen? Because I do believe, like the law of action, for instance, and the law of attraction, I believe they should go together. So when The Secret, the movie came out, a lot of people said, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to put the intention there. It's going to happen. But there's many cases where you can wish all you want, but you're not going to have a motorbike sitting out in your lawn with a ribbon around it unless you take some action.
That's right.
And so I believe in the action side. So Thriving was kind of like the law of action, if you will. And then Enlightened was kind of like the holistic, organic side to it. So it was like, again, maybe a little closer to the law of attraction. So how can you run your business in a more enlightened way, if you will? So what was missing, I felt, was one's about like how do you run your business from an organic, one's from how do you run it from a pure business point of view. But the component that was missing is why should you bother doing it in the first place?
Right.
And how do you start? Like, where's the starting point? The starting point isn't just you wake up and the business has been running for 5 years. So I realized the book was missing. If you look at it as almost like a sequence of a story, it was missing the opening of the story. Who is Bill? Why is Bill in this story? Like, it'd be like seeing a movie and the main character comes in halfway through the movie. You don't know anything about them. So I felt it was missing. Actually, it was kind of weird. It came out last, but it was missing the opening component, which was how do we find our why? Why are we here? What is our purpose? What's our calling? Why can't I do it? Why not me? Why not now? All those kind of things. And so the book looks to address those. So I felt, first of all, it was the missing piece. But secondly, going back to what I said earlier, when I discovered my why, it changed everything for me. It was the game changer. And I really just want more people to experience that. When I heard that statistic more than once, 5%, that meant 95% hadn't discovered it. I wanted to at least reach a percentage of those 90% with this idea of it's worth finding your why, and also giving them strategy for how to find their why, but also within the book, teaching them how not to talk themselves out of it as well. So the book is built like on 4 whys. So why not you, and why not now?
Okay.
And if that sounds familiar to any of the viewers, Jim Rohn had a talk years ago, the great philosopher Jim Rohn, business philosopher, that basically covered those 4 whys. And then they also shared the quote in the movie Narnia, the exact same, the why not. And so I did, and then of course there's Simon Sinek's book and TED Talk called Start With Why. So this why kept coming up, and really I was all about the passion guy, if you will. And so for me, I really like this idea of these 4 whys, but Jim Rohn's talk is more talking to you about them. Whereas, so I didn't want to kind of take his framework and do it again, because to me, he's already done a good job of it. But I love the idea of exploring those 4 whys. So I made the first section of the book, the core section, about those 4 whys. Mm-hmm. So I asked those same 4 questions, but I didn't watch Jim Rohn's talk or anything once I decided those were the 4 whys. I didn't go back and watch Narnia to figure out why they were saying it. And I didn't watch Simon Sinek Start With Why again. I wanted to have a whole new, fresh perspective on it. Right. So it was the idea of why should you find your why? How can you find it? And how can you get the guts, if you will, or the bravery to actually take action?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to write the book to teach people how to do it and to help more people find their why, and at the same time teach people that it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's that part. And then you asked the secondary part is how can people get a copy?
Yeah.
So the greater news, I said, or the great news, is that what I've done for the short term, and this ties back to me it being a 3-part series. The ultimate plan, and it always has been, was to bring the 3 books together once they were done as one completed book. So as you can imagine from what I just mentioned, Why is going to become the first part to that book, then Thriving, and then Enlightened. And so until that happens, though, I've decided to offer it for free.
Nice.
So now it's a digital book until we offer, until we put it all together and package it the other way. And once it's packaged as the 3 books, I'll be taking it out to talks and seminars. It'll be going to bookstores, all that kind of stuff, like I did with the previous books I put out. But the digital books, I really want to reach people, and thought for people that are willing to jump on it and take advantage of it, if I can give it to them and it's not costing me anything, why wouldn't I want to?
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to give it to them digitally, all it costs me really is to set up the website and the time to do the book and the editor and that kind of stuff. But I didn't have to distribute the book in the same way I would have to a hard copy book. So it's close to 200 pages when you factor in the quotes by leaders. I think like yourself, Zaheen, we have you in our books where we have a section on the thought leaders. So the book itself is the core book and the thought leader quotes. So it's close to 200 pages, but completely free for anybody watching this right now that wants to grab it in the next, say, 30 to 40 days. So how do people grab it? I mentioned earlier the website was the Book of Why. So it's thebookofwhy.com.
Okay.
And the passcode, so you need a code, it'll ask for code, is simply the word why in lowercase.
Is that in uppercase or lowercase?
Lowercase.
Okay. All right. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. So thebookofwhy.com, and the passcode is Y, all in lowercase. Well, Corey, wow, the time has passed and we've been having fun. And again, I have learned so much from you, and I always do, because you always have something fresh to share. And I think my big one was just the strategy that you had about how to answer the questions, and then doing the spider legs and circle. That in itself was gold.
Oh, thank you so much. And, I always learn from you as well. We've had you on our show. We're going to be on again soon. And I always learn from you as well. And also, I have to say, you mentioned earlier the battle that you have been dealing with, and, talking about resilience and that. It's so amazing. You totally, you talk about resilience often, and you totally inspired me as somebody who is actually living that. Like you had to practice what you've been teaching.
Yes.
In a whole new way, probably. And so I just want to say I admire you for everything you went through. And I'm glad you said you thought about throwing in the towel on what the work you do, this type of work. And I'm glad you didn't.
Yes.
Because the world needs your story and needs to keep hearing it. And now I think you even have another story that's universal that a lot of people, whether it's them or their family, have encountered, that you can share and talk about the resilience you've had to use.
Yes.
Face of that. So thank you for being you and for all that you've went through and sharing that with people, and for the bravery you've showed.
Thank you, Corey. That means a lot to me. Thank you. And thank you for coming away from the party that you had and going in someone's basement and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Happy to do it.
All right. Okay. So there you have it. Make sure you go to the website and get the book. It's free. I mean, come on. Why wouldn't you do that? So just like every time, make sure you make this day count and thrive in life. Bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to Thrive in Life with your hosts, Zaheen Nanji. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit ZaheenNanji.com. That's ZaheenNanji.com. We'll catch you on the next episode of Thrive in Life.